Welcome back to Just Chattin', and this is the series of videos we do on Thursday and Sunday evenings just for our own entertainment. However, tonight we are doing this for our education as well. Now, Audie is behind me, sound asleep. Unfortunately, he chose to help me make this video. In other words, I worked and he knocked things over to get my attention. So yeah, he's had a busy day and he's sleeping it off now. Yellow for Catherine, for Lex's mom, for everyone coping with cancer. We are just wishing you the very, very best and a speedy and complete recovery. So we need to talk about what we're going to do because we're taking a look at the Vanity Fair article. That article has a 1 hour read time. Actually, it's like 50-some minutes. So that's the read time on this. The processing and, sorting the information in your head is even longer. So we are not going to take a look at the entire article this evening. I'm going to have to split it up in between 3 videos because otherwise this would be crazy. This would just be a lot more than any of you would be willing to sit through. So we're going to look at the first third of it this evening. And why we are doing this, well, frankly, it's behind a paywall. You have to subscribe to Vanity Fair to get your hands on it. So I did. I have it. We are going to look at this. And so what I'm going to do is present you Vanity Fair's article as Vanity Fair presented it. So you're going to get the Vanity Fair reading of it. And then we are going to take some breaks during that process and talk about what this means. So we'll be back in 22 seconds. So let's start by discussing the significance of the article sort of globally. Everybody, every media outlet pretty much on the planet is talking about this article. Vanity Fair for a long time had been a staunch supporter of Nutmeg. In fact, I was starting to wonder if they hadn't taken on the job of her personal public relations firm because their coverage of her was so insanely positive. Their failure to look at anything that was even remotely contrary to Nutmeg's own narrative was shocking, frankly. And when most of us took a look at the highly biased coverage from the mainstream media, it was outlets like Vanity Fair we were looking at. Well, not anymore. This article, although I'm going to start off by telling you, I think it was about as fair as they felt they could be. And certainly there were no deep dives into a lot of the issues that those of us in the Megxit community have targeted as suspicious or controversial. They are definitely digging in to a number of issues, and I think in ways that our community has not really looked at them in the past. So let's just get right into it. What you are going to hear is Vanity Fair's own reading of the article. What you are going to see is the actual text of the article. Here you go.
Inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's big business ambitions, 5 years after their royal exit. Published by Vanity Fair. Written by Anna Peel. The House proved it. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex could have it all. Their Montecito home offered all the fresh promises of a 21st century California mansion and the cloistering of a gated neighborhood from which they could emerge on their own terms. In the house's 13 fireplaces, described as mostly centuries-old examples brought over from France, there was even some European history, stripped of any potentially uncomfortable context. At $14.65 million for more than 18,000 square feet, half the current median price per square foot in Montecito, Rockbridge was a steal. The oligarch owner's romantic relationship had deteriorated to the point where he was compelled to offload far below market value, according to a source with knowledge, and the property seemed just right for the Duke and Duchess, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. It was the perfect launchpad for Archewell, their nonprofit and entertainment studio, an approximation of a part noblesse oblige, part aspiring independently wealthy mogul model, one that Elizabeth, Charles, and William rejected by fiat during the January 2020 Sandringham Summit. This January marks 5 years since that failed parley. Leaving the royal family has brought tests for the couple, legal, financial, reputational, personal, and practical. Going from divinely chosen, or at least chosen by someone else who was divinely chosen, members of a 1,200-year-old institution to startup founders in exile is a tough adjustment. But there has also been opportunity. Over many months, Vanity Fair spoke with dozens of people who have worked with and lived alongside the couple to understand the impact they've had on their new coastal California community, the challenges of enacting the ambitions of 2 first-time CEOs, and how their experience with the monarchy foreshadowed some of their current difficulties. Harry and Meghan declined to be interviewed for this article. Harry still works closely with the charities he founded, the Invictus Games Foundation, and Santa Bali, an organization focusing on mental fitness and the impact of poverty and HIV/AIDS in southern African countries. He has real gravitas when he speaks about his work in Africa, says someone inside the couple's circle, and he is free from Willie, as well as the future king's supposed dominion over that continent, as Harry confessed in his 2023 memoir, Spare. Africa was his thing, Harry said. Archewell also encompasses Meghan's efforts to empower and educate young women, like the 40 by 40 initiative, where for her 40th birthday she asked 40 well-known friends, such as Melissa McCarthy and then First Lady of Canada, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, to each spend 40 minutes on Zoom mentoring a woman returning to the workplace in the wake of the pandemic. On March 14th of last year, the 4th anniversary of their flight to California, Meghan rejoined Instagram to announce American Riviera Orchard, a home goods and sundries line. The Sussexes have announced Meghan's second podcast, though not the title or premise of it. Archewell Productions also recently produced 2 high-profile Netflix series, a docu-series called Polo, which premiered December 10th and features the world of Harry's buddy Nacho Figueres, and the reality show With Love, Meghan. The latter is a hospitality endeavor that, according to the Netflix promotional language, reimagines the genre of lifestyle programming, blending practical how-tos and candid conversation with friends, new and old. 3 days before her show's scheduled premiere date of January 15th, Meghan announced that the series would be pushed to March 4th, as we focus on the needs of those impacted by the wildfires in my home state of California. The couple has been volunteering amid the crisis in Los Angeles and donating to people displaced by the fires, as well as taking in friends who had to evacuate their own homes. They have this naivete and their hopefulness about what's possible in terms of storytelling and good works and all those things, says producer Jane Marie, who collaborated with the couple while they developed audio projects at Archewell and later produced a podcast with Michelle Obama. I wish I had that kind of optimism.
So in the opening paragraphs of this article, they focus on what what our time frame is, what is the point of the article, which is basically a review of what has happened in the past 4 years since Nutmeg, no, 5 years actually, since Nutmeg and the sock puppet fled the UK. Their life in Montecito, they talk about the McMansion. As you know, because I've said this before, there are many YouTubers who believe that they don't live there, that this is not actually their house, that it just doesn't make sense that privacy-obsessed people like Nutmeg and the sock puppet would be living in a home that has been rented out and apparently is still being rented out for photo shoots, and as the fact that they don't even do their own filming in that house, but other people are filming in it. There are a lot of questions people have, but that's not the point of this. As they begin, it's clear they're starting off by focusing their attention on Harry. And you will find the first third of this article, which is what I'm sharing with you on this video, is largely Harry focused, which is good because very often he gets left out of the evaluations of the actions of these two. And a lot of people will give him a pass. A lot of people are furious with him. There's a lot of mixed opinion. They do start off by mentioning his work with Steube and Invictus Games, which they say he founded, which we all know is not true. I'm not going to get into that, but I know there are loads of you who are going to hit me with that in the comments. Yes, we know it's not true, and we know that they are simply perpetuating the story that has come out of Archewell, that Harry invented the Invictus Games and Harry invented Steube, and all these things were done for him when he was a working member of the royal family. They do also mention Nutmeg's 40 by 40 initiative, although interestingly enough, they don't say where that led. And as we all know, many of us were waiting for even one story to come out of that, of one of her 40 friends having mentored one working woman. Didn't happen. So that is the beginning, and as we go on, we are going to see more focus on Harry.
Optimism abounded as the couple embarked on their Spotify deal in 2020, both for them and for those who were coming in to help do the work. I thought that I had the role of a lifetime, says a person who worked in media projects, who was a fan going in and eager to make the type of life-changing content Harry and Meghan seemed to want to create. I thought I was going to be besties with Meghan and Harry, and we were going to, run around the world saving people. Interest in the couple was unslackable, but it remained to be seen whether they were actually interesting, beyond Harry's uniquely difficult upbringing and Meghan's years of defending herself from shoddy treatment and racism, whether in the British press or from members of her husband's family. As one former Spotify employee put it, "The thing you're escaping is the reason you're compelling." Those stories would be meted out in different media. Breathless reports of a $20 million Penguin Random House contract, Spare, and the $100 million partnership with Netflix, Harry and Meghan. According to a representative for Netflix, "We don't disclose our financial deals with talent, but I can confirm to you on the record that the $100 million figure is not correct." On the August 2022 cover of The Cut Meghan did to promote her first and only Spotify podcast, Archetypes, she said, "I'm so excited to talk, and it's like I'm not finding my voice. I've had my voice for a long time, but being able to use it." When repeatedly asked by the interviewer what she wanted to say with her newly free voice, Meghan demurred. "I have a lot to say until I don't. Do you like that? Sometimes, as they say, the silent part is still part of the song," she said, noting, "I've never had to sign anything that restricts me from talking. I can talk about my whole experience and make a choice not to." One of the people who spoke with VF for this story says they signed a non-disclosure agreement to be employed by Harry and Meghan. A person who worked closely with the couple and loves them says, "I have no idea what Harry's interests are beyond polo. No clue what his inner life is like." The development process was challenging. The former Spotify employee says they had this idea to do a podcast because they knew celebrities did them, a category differentiated between celebrities who get a lot of money to begin podcasting, like Harry and Meghan, and celebrities who get large deals after proving themselves to be capable podcasters, like Smartless's Will Arnett, Sean Hayes, and Jason Bateman. The former Spotify employee says Harry and Meghan didn't do what celebrities do on podcasts, which is turn on the mic and talk. They wanted a big theme that would explain the world, but they had no ideas. Someone who worked closely with them on audio projects disputes this version, lamenting that because of Meghan and Harry's insistence on silence from employees and their own reticence, the public doesn't know about good projects that had to be abandoned for practical reasons. "It feels like the only story is they didn't satisfy their contract," she says. "It's not like work wasn't being done." People involved with production say the couple did trial runs on some big ideas, like a This American Lifestyle show where Harry and Meghan took turns hosting and talking to interesting civilian guests. As Bloomberg reported, Harry wanted to host a series where he interviewed powerful men with complicated stories, like Mark Zuckerberg, Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump. The concept wasn't just that the men shared challenging early lives. It was that their experiences made them into sociopaths, or so Harry envisioned, one person familiar with the ideation process says. The person who worked in media confirms there was a sociopath podcast. The person who worked closely with the couple on audio projects recalls Harry saying, "I have very bad childhood trauma. Obviously. My mother was essentially murdered. What is it about me that didn't make me one of these bad guys?" To implore a season's worth of world-famous sociopaths to talk about how they developed sociopathy would be what is referred to in access journalism as a booking challenge. As time passed, it would be nearly 2 years between the couple's deal signing and the premiere of Archetypes, Spotify began applying pressure to produce something, anything, that people might listen to. The former Spotify employee says Harry came to the Los Angeles office once and asked for a cup of cocoa. There was none in the office, so employees scrambled to obtain some. An idea was pitched to Harry. What if he reviewed a hot chocolate every week while chatting with a different friend, which he and his team considered and rejected. Another concept was that Harry would fix something every week, ranging from a flat tire to global warming. He wanted to do a podcast about disabled people who compete in the Invictus Games, the former Spotify employee says. But there's no crossover between the audience who would listen to that and people who want to hear about Harry's life. Harry and Meghan did produce a 2023 Netflix docuseries called Heart of Invictus, which significantly underperformed Harry and Meghan. The former Spotify employee says it was challenging to engage Harry, and a person who interviewed for a job with the couple says, "I just felt like he kind of didn't want to be there doing that at this time. My expectation was charming receiving line, and it was clear he wasn't that person, at least that day. And at least in the context of a hiring manager. A person who worked on an event during Harry's book tour says he has the greatest manners I've ever seen, hands down. Like I can't believe his knees are as supple as they are. He was getting up and down any time somebody walked into a room. He was unfailingly kind and friendly to everyone." During the interview, the potential employee says Harry's attitude was either, "Well, why should I do this?" or "Why are we doing this?" The interviewee says they wondered, "Didn't Spotify pay you a lot of money to do this?" The person inside the couple's circle says he looks like the kind of guy who would, frankly, happily work for charities for the rest of his life and would be very happy if Meghan made all the money and he didn't need to.
So, as we start to take a look at this, they focus on the Spotify contract, the podcasts that Nutmeg and the Sock Puppet were contracted to do for Spotify. And that, by the way, is most of the first third of this article. That's the focus of that. And the picture that emerges of Harry during this period is someone who is completely out of touch. The word naivete is used, but he's painted as a nice guy, a guy with good manners who doesn't know and doesn't care what's going on. He could not focus on any particular subject that he might want to make a podcast about. And eventually, after rejecting virtually everything from soup to nuts, I mean, really, they threw the gamut at him, he had his own idea about the birth of a sociopath, I am assuming, that he was going to focus on people who he believes are sociopaths, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and Mark Zuckerberg. I'm having trouble finding common threads here. Donald Trump's early childhood was spent in great wealth. His father was a very wealthy man. Donald Trump inherited vast wealth. Well, obviously he had some commonality with Harry in terms of Harry's childhood growing up in palaces. But Putin grew up in Leningrad in the aftermath of the Second World War. We have talked about this before. The reason he's an only child is because his parents' other children did not survive. Good Lord, one of his brothers died of starvation. Holy guacamole. That is about as far from Harry's childhood and Donald Trump's childhood as you could possibly get. So I'm not sure why Harry would see any common threads here. Zuckerberg, as I understand, had a normal middle-class childhood. Again, whoa, I'm not seeing the common thread. But again, we have Harry saying, what was it about them, or what was it about me that they all turned into bad guys and I didn't? Who says you didn't, Harry? Who says you didn't? You are in a foreign country, a guest in our country, trashing our Constitution. I'm sorry, Harry, in my book, that pretty much makes you a lot worse than Putin, because whatever he says about America, at least he's saying it from Russia. Thank you very much. He's not in our country enjoying the benefits of our freedoms, enjoying the opportunities to run a business, to get paid by Spotify for doing virtually nothing, and then criticizing us for it. No thanks. So, yeah, that was just delightful. Vanity Fair did not comment on any of this. They just put the information out there. And I think they did this so that those of us reading the article can look at it for ourselves and say, holy Toledo, this boy is delusional. So let's go back. Let's take another look, because they are going to cover more of the nightmare that was the working experience for the people at Spotify. Here you go.
On his self-titled podcast, Bill Simmons described his own experience working with the Sussexes at Spotify. The fucking grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them, Simmons said. I have got to get drunk one night and tell the story of the Zoom I had with Harry to try and help him with a podcast idea. It's one of my best stories. Fuck them. The grifters. Harry and Meghan became increasingly nervous about how their content would impact them. Marie says, I can say that they had really great ideas for shows, interesting pitches, interesting guests, but them as the deliverers, or either of them as the hosts of these more kind of edgy ideas, would have been like, they would have had to move again. I think it's a combination of self-censorship for good reason and the corporate powers that be that run podcasting that don't know what that is to create valuable shows. In combination, those things make it really hard to make good stuff. The person who worked in media projects imitates the thought process behind any decision about the couple's projects. Well, he has a million things that he has to protect, and he has the book, and they have the documentary, and they don't want to make the Queen upset, and their public image. That source says the idea for Archetypes came from another employee, not Meghan, though the employee didn't own any of the intellectual property. Archetypes began production in January 2021. Though the former Spotify employee says the initial expectation was that Archewell would handle production for the series, the process took so long that Spotify's studio Gimlet was called in. A source familiar with the production of Archetypes says this required additional costs to and resources from Spotify, though a current Spotify employee refutes that the extra support was a burden. Virtually the entire Gimlet team would be laid off in the year following Archetypes' release, but employees blame mismanagement at Spotify rather than any individual project. The former Spotify source says, Archetypes was complicated as a podcast concept. You had to explain what the archetype was, then why the woman embodied it, but also how it wasn't true about her. Every episode was like, this is my friend who has been called that archetype, but is not that archetype. These archetypes, actually stereotypes, included Diva, Mariah Carey, and Bimbo, Paris Hilton, and Eliza Schlesinger. As for those friends, there was an expectation that Meghan would be able to use her personal Rolodex to book the show, the way hosts like Simmons and the Pod Save America guys do. The person who worked in media projects says the assumption was, Meghan's going to be on the phone with the Pope tomorrow. The former Spotify employee says in addition to Taylor Swift, they heard rumors that Beyoncé and Megan Thee Stallion were asked to come on the show and declined. Other people who worked on the podcast also say they heard those names mentioned, though a source close to the situation says Megan Thee Stallion's team knew nothing about any request. According to the source in media projects, Meghan would agree to provocative ideas and then walk them back. In one episode, she wanted to actually say the word bitch because, as the source remembers Meghan saying, you hear it all the time. It ended up with Meghan calling it the B word. An episode titled Slut, intended to center on how trans women's sexuality is used against them, was retitled Human Being by Meghan and had to be completely reimagined late in production. Every episode got more and more watered down and further away from actual conversation, the source says. It felt like a very Women's and Gender Studies 101 taught in 2003. Though the Spotify contract has widely been reported as worth $20 million, two sources told VF such deals are generally not paid out in lump sums. In other words, the couple would not likely have received the full amount without meeting benchmarks beyond making one 12-episode season of a podcast. Spotify does not comment on deal terms. The issues extended into the actual workplace. Terry Wood, an executive vice president at Oprah Winfrey's Harpo Productions, was brought in to be what Meghan would later call her right hand when Archetypes won a People's Choice Award in 2022. The source familiar with the production of Archetypes describes Wood's anger, saying that she yelled at Spotify staffers when Meghan changed her mind about episodes. Wood did not respond to VF's request for comment. The source who worked in media projects says Meghan's own relationships with employees tended to follow a familiar pattern. She would be warm and effusive at the beginning, engendering an atmosphere of professional camaraderie. When something went poorly, often due to Meghan and Harry's own demands, such as a teaser for Archetypes being released 5 months before the show premiered and before there was any tape to promote, Meghan would become cold and withholding toward the person she perceived to be responsible. The source says it was really, really, really awful, very painful, because she's constantly playing checkers. I'm not even going to say chess, but she's just very aware of where everybody is on her board. And when you are not in, you are to be thrown to the wolves at any given moment. In practice, they say, that manifested as undermining. It's talking behind your back. It's gnawing at your sense of self. Really like Mean Girls teenager. Marie had a different experience with Meghan. She's just a lovely, genuine person, she said. The person who worked in media projects read stories in the tabloids about Meghan bullying palace aides and couldn't imagine such behavior actually happened. After working with her, though, this person realized, oh, any given Tuesday this happened. While it beggars belief that Meghan actually shouted at a palace aide, as has been reported, a person who interacted with her professionally says, you can be yelled at even if somebody doesn't raise their voice. It's funny that people don't differentiate between the energy of being yelled at and literally somebody screaming at you. Two sources say a colleague with ties to Archetypes took a leave of absence after working on 3 episodes, then left Gimlet altogether. Several others described taking extended breaks from work to escape scrutiny, exiting their job, or undergoing long-term therapy after working with Meghan. The person who interacted professionally with her says, I think if Meghan acknowledged her own shortcomings or personal contributions to situations rather than staying trapped in a victim narrative, her perception might be better. They added, with the soggy laugh of a plebe rendering judgment on the Duchess of Sussex, but who am I to criticize Meghan Markle? She's doing great.
Yeah, it seems like all of the staff bullying allegations that had begun back in the UK and had surfaced in 2020, it looks like not only is there reason to believe they were true, but this behavior was continuing. And people at this point are speaking out about it. Horrific instances of bullying, of Nutmeg constantly going after people, and people being, broken by the experience, leaving their jobs. That sort of, toxic doesn't even seem close. That sort of vicious, I'm going to go with vicious instead, vicious behavior of continually verbally abusing and bullying people, of acting like, you are the goddess from on high, and they are lucky to just be in your presence, is appalling. Any employer who treats their staff like this ends up with no staff, which, of course, we've seen already from the massive turnovers in Nutmeg staff. And this, by the way, is where we are going to break off with our viewing of this article. We're about a third of the way through. And I obviously, I want to give you a chance to just absorb this, think it over, and take a look at this. Also, you tell me in the comments what resonated with you. What did you find particularly egregious, interesting, enlightening, whatever? Definitely, we want to deal with this. So we've got Harry as sort of polite but clueless, not really engaged in anything that's going on. People spoke of, having a clue about, his inner life if he has one. Just out of his depth and over his head. And Nutmeg primarily as the mover and shaker of these enterprises. We also get a picture that emerges of a woman who is very willing to work, utterly intolerant of any blowback, any pushback of any sort, even from staff, that if she says yes, you had better not say no to her. And the picture is not pretty. And we're only a third of the way through the article. So We're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I will see you all next time. We are going to continue this because, as I say, it's available if you pay for the subscription, and nevertheless, we have the right to view and critique it. So we're okay in terms of our use of this material. I hope YouTube agrees with me, but we'll see. All right, we're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I hope to see you next time as we continue. In the meanwhile, have a terrific day.